Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Compromise. Background. From 1895 until his death in 1915, Booker T. Washington, a former slave who had built the Tuskegee Institute into a major center of industrial training for African American youths, was America's dominant black leader. Washington felt that excessive stress had been placed on university educations for African Americans. He believed that their need to earn a living called instead for training in crafts and trades. In an effort to spur the growth of African American business ownership, Washington also organized the National Negro Business League in 1900. Washington was highly successful in winning influential white support and became the most powerful African American in the country's history at the time. But the harsh reality of discrimination prevented many of his Tuskegee Institute graduates from using their skills. From 1895 to 1915, many black Americans were kept from voting. Segregation became more deeply entrenched, and anti-black violence increased. Between 1900 and 1914, there were more than 1,000 known lynchings, and anti-black riots raged in both the South and the North. The speech we are about to read is called the Atlanta Compromise, which refers to the ideals expressed by Booker T. Washington in a September 18, 1895 speech in Atlanta, Georgia. On that day, Washington spoke before a predominantly white audience at a farming expo called the Cotton States and International Exposition. The speech focused on progress since emancipation and racial cooperation, and it advocated moderate, middle ground positions. His address was one of the most important and influential speeches in American history, guiding African American resistance to discrimination and establishing Washington as one of the leading black spokesmen in America. In the speech, 30 years after the abolition of slavery, Washington urged African Americans to accept social segregation in the present as they worked on acquiring practical skills and economic security. He believed that African Americans would gain the esteem and respect of white society and eventually be treated as full and equal citizens through hard work. As a note, the word Negro appears in our readings because in the 1800s that was considered to be proper and polite. It was used by African American leaders like Washington and Du Bois to refer to themselves and their fellow black Americans. However, the word Negro is now considered outdated, and many people even find it offensive. So, we must understand that although it's totally normal for Washington and Du Bois to use that term, it wouldn't be okay for modern people to start throwing it around. Booker T. Washington's speech to the Atlanta Convention. 1/3 of the population of the South is of the Negro race. No enterprise seeking the material, civil, or moral welfare of this section can disregard this element of our population and reach the highest success. I but convey to you, Mr. President and Directors, the sentiment of the masses of my race when I say that in no way have the value and manhood of the American Negro been more fittingly and generously recognized than by the managers of this magnificent exposition at every stage of its progress. It is a recognition that will do more to cement the friendship of the two races than any occurrence since the dawn of our freedom. Not only this, but the opportunity here afforded will awaken among us a new era of industrial progress. Ignorant and inexperienced, it is not strange that in the first years of our new life we begin at the top instead of at the bottom, that a seat in Congress or the state legislature was more sought than real estate or industrial skill, that the political convention or stump speaking had more attractions than starting a dairy farm or vegetable garden. Imagine this. A ship lost at sea for many days suddenly sighted a friendly vessel. From the mast of the unfortunate vessel was seen a signal. "Water! Water, we die of thirst. The answer from the friendly vessel at once came back. Cast down your bucket where you are. A second time the signal, Water! Water! Send us water! ran up from the distressed vessel, and it was answered, Cast down your bucket where you are. And a third and fourth signal for water was answered, Cast down your bucket where you are. The captain of the distressed vessel at last heeding the injunction, cast down his bucket, and it came up full of fresh, sparkling water from the mouth of the Amazon River. To those of my race who depend on bettering their condition in a foreign land, or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the southern white man, who is their next-door neighbor, I would say, cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down in making friends in every manly way of the people of all races by whom we are surrounded. Cast it down in agriculture, in mechanics, in commerce, in domestic service, and in the professions. And in this connection, it is well to bear in mind that whatever other sins the South may be called to bear, when it comes to business, pure and simple, it is in the South that the Negro is given a man's chance in the commercial world. And in nothing is this exposition more eloquent than in emphasizing this chance. Our greatest danger is that in the great leap from slavery to freedom, we may overlook the fact that the masses of us are to live by the productions of our hands, and fail to keep in mind that we shall prosper in proportion as we learn to dignify and glorify common labor, and put brains and skill into the common occupations of life, shall prosper in proportion as we learn to draw the line between the superficial and the substantial, the ornamental gewgaws of life and the useful. No race can prosper till it learns that there is as much dignity in tilling a field as in writing a poem. It is at the bottom of life we must begin, not at the top. Nor should we permit our grievances to overshadow our opportunities. To those of the white race who look to the incoming of those of foreign birth and strange tongue and habits for the prosperity of the South, were I permitted, I would repeat what I say to my own race. Cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down among the 8 million Negroes whose habits you know, whose fidelity and love you have tested in days when to have proved treacherous meant the ruin of your firesides. Cast down your bucket among these people who have, without strikes and labor wars, tilled your fields, cleared your forests, builded your railroads and cities, brought forth treasures from the bowels of the earth, and helped make possible this magnificent representation of the progress of the South. Casting down your bucket among my people, helping and encouraging them as you're doing on these grounds, here at the Expo, you will find that they will buy your surplus land, make blossom the waste places in your fields, and run your factories. While doing this, you can be sure in the future, as in the past, that you and your families will be surrounded by the most patient, faithful, law-abiding, and unresentful people that the world has seen. As we have proved our loyalty to you in the past, in nursing your children, watching by the sick bed of your mothers and fathers, and often following them with tear-dimmed eyes to their graves, so in the future, in our humble way, we shall stand by you with a devotion that no foreigner can approach, ready to lay down our lives, if need be, in defense of yours, interlacing our industrial, commercial, civil, and religious life with yours in a way that shall make the interests of both races one. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress. There is no defense or security for any of us except in the highest intelligence and development of all. If anywhere there are efforts tending to curtail the fullest growth of the Negro, Let these efforts be turned into stimulating, encouraging, and making him the most useful and intelligent citizen. Effort or means so invested will pay 1,000% interest. These efforts will be twice blessed, blessing him that gives and him that takes. There is no escape through law of man or God from the inevitable. The laws of changeless justice bind oppressor with oppressed, and close as sin and suffering joined, we march to fate abreast. Nearly 16 million hands will aid you in pulling the load upward, or they will pull against you the load downward. We shall constitute 1/3 and more of the ignorance and crime of the South, or 1/3 of its intelligence and progress. We shall constitute 1/3 to the business and industrial prosperity of the South, or we shall provide a veritable body of death, stagnating, depressing, retarding every effort to advance the body politic. Gentlemen of the exposition, as we present to you our humble effort at an exhibition of our progress, you must not expect overmuch. Starting 30 years ago, with the ownership here and there and a few quilts and pumpkins and chickens, remember the path that has led from these to the innovations and production of agricultural implements, buggies, steam engines, newspapers, books, statuary, carving, paintings, the management of drugstores and banks, has not been trodden without contact with thorns and thistles. While we take pride in what we exhibit as a result of our independent efforts, we do not for a moment forget that our part in this exhibition would fall far short of your expectations but for the constant help that has come to our educational life, not only from the Southern states, but especially from Northern philanthropists who have made their gifts a constant stream of blessing and encouragement. The wisest among my race understand that the agitation of questions of social equality is the extremest folly, and that progress in the enjoyment of all the privileges that will come to us must be the result of severe and constant struggle rather than of artificial forcing. No race that has anything to contribute to the markets of the world is long in any degree ostracized. It is important and right that all privileges of the law be ours, but it is vastly more important that we be prepared for the exercise of these privileges. The opportunity to earn $1 in a factory just now is worth infinitely more than the opportunity to spend $1 in an opera house. In conclusion, may I repeat that nothing in 30 years has given us more hope and encouragement and drawn us so near to you of the white race as this opportunity afforded by the exposition. And here bending, as it were, over the altar that represents the results of the struggles of your race and mine, both starting practically empty-handed 3 decades ago, I pledge that in your effort to work out the great and intricate problem which God has laid at the doors of the South, you shall have at all times the patient, sympathetic help of my race. Only let this be constantly in mind, that while from representations in these buildings of the product of field, of forest, of mine, of factory, letters and art, much good will come, yet far above and beyond material benefits will be that higher good that, let us pray God, will come in a blotting out of sectional differences and racial animosities and suspicions, in a determination to administer absolute justice, in a willing obedience among all classes to the mandates of law. This, coupled with our material prosperity, will bring into our beloved South a new heaven and a new earth.